Hey everybody, welcome to the special edition of Ling. We've got a special guest here. She's been here before to talk about art history, but today we're talking about a subject that's very near and dear to our hearts, Twilight.
My other passion.
Now, Grace, would you say that you are a Twilight fan?
I'm a ratty for sure.
She's a ratty, not ratty. I thought I heard radish there for a second, but she's a ratty.
Yeah,
So,
a rat.
as in a
sewer rat. That was rat noises.
Rat noises because of there's a Facebook group called I think it's called
TSP.
Twilight Shitposting,
Yeah.
and
Queen Kayla, if you're watching this, please notice me.
I don't think Queen Kayla will ever watch Ling King in her
That's
life.
okay.
So I think what we're all wondering when we're watching Twilight, okay, we're looking at these vampires and they have names like Arrow and Caius. They're from the Roman Empire, and they open their mouths and they speak English with a regular American accent. And in Arrow's case, not only does he speak English perfectly, he speaks English with a modern British accent, complete with an intrusive R when he says, quote, "Bella is alive at last." After all. I'm sorry, I messed up the quote.
I
quote.
can't believe you messed that up. It's iconic.
It is, as the kids say, iconic. But what I wonder is your thoughts on why would someone born in Rome speak English with such a perfect British accent to include an intrusive R?
Oh, okay. Well, there could be several reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One could be that he lived in the British Isles or in a British dominated part of the world for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore would adapt the intrusive R that way.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that just by living in a place that speaks that language, he's, as a vampire, going to be interested in learning how to speak the language of the Muggles.
I'm not saying that he is like, ooh, yeah, let me get that intrusive R in there because it's more authentic. I'm saying as somebody who's living literally thousands of years. He was born in like 1300 BC. So if he lives in England for 500 years, you'd think he'd probably pick up on that. I mean, people who live in Britain for 20 years start saying British things or might have like weird little things that creep into their normal English. So I don't think it's like too far out there to say that if living for a long period of time in the British Isles, he would adapt that kind of thing.
Okay.
You don't think that's valid though?
Well,
tell me why not.
I wonder, do we know exactly where Arrow lived that whole time? I'm sure that we don't, because you said he was born 1300 BC?
1340 BC.
That's before the Roman Empire.
Yeah, he was born in Greece.
Okay, my bad. He's ancient Greek.
Yeah.
He wasn't. He wouldn't have spoke Latin as a first language. He would have spoken Greek. But the point still stands. Why would he learn to speak British English?
Okay,
my question.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, go ahead.
So my question is like.
Ask your question, and then I'll give you another possible reason.
Okay.
So ask your question first, I guess.
Do vampires have that type of neuroplasticity?
Yes. It's actually talked about when Bella's changed into a vampire, that she feels like when she was a human, she's like juggling several things at once in her mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like easily distracted, and it's like changing lanes on an interstate, I guess. But when she becomes a vampire, she realizes she can hold more than one thing in her mind at once. So she can think about two different things at the same time, just because her mind's just that much more powerful. They also have much more powerful senses.
Okay.
So, like, their minds are more powerful, their senses are more powerful, they're physically more powerful, they're stronger, they're more indestructible, they live until they're destroyed, and they can only be destroyed by very certain means. Like, vampires do have a much greater capacity in any sense than humans do.
Okay.
That's
so
not their whole spiel.
That's a lot more believable than what I thought coming into this.
What, that they were just a human
that
brain that got old?
Well, like...
No. They don't age.
That's true. That is different. So,
And-
but like, I don't know. I guess my point is like, why would Arrow bother to do that? He's like the king of the vampires.
Okay, simple reason. He's a ruler. He has to communicate with the people that he's ruling with. And some of these vampires, they talk about this, well, not a lot, but there are certain times throughout this grand Twilight vampire history of the world where the Volturi, who Arrow's a part of, if you don't know, it was listening. Volturi is like the ruling class of the vampire world. They have to step in very quickly and take care of things.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Victoria is building an army of newborn vampires, which means she's taking adults and turning them into vampires. And vampires are at their strongest in their first year of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are people from Seattle that she's turning very quickly. They don't have time to learn other languages. They don't know Italian. And so obviously the Volturi need to be able to step in, communicate quickly, get the answers they need out of them, understand what's going on, and dispose of them quickly if they need to. But sometimes they show up at a place and they end up not having to do anything.
Okay.
Like in Breaking Dawn.
Right.
Where they show up and they are prepared for a fight and they end up not fighting. And that's sometimes a thing that happens. In which case, they need to be prepared to talk to them.
Okay.
Even if
diplomacy.
Yes, diplomacy. They need to be able to talk to them. And so it makes sense that he would know English in the first place, if that was your question, right? Is why
Right.
he would even bother to learn English. It's because he needs to be able to be in control of vampires who are scattered throughout the entire world.
Right.
And he claims to have sovereignty over all of them.
Right. I don't think that answers why he would bother to learn to speak like with a British English accent, as opposed to just speaking English the best he can.
Listen, I have a very clear answer for that as well. He has to learn English from somebody, right?
True.
He can't just pick it up in a book. He's got to learn to speak it, especially if his mouth is used to like Greek formations of words, or you know what I mean. So he's got to learn to speak it from somebody. And if he learned to speak it from somebody who is British, then it would make sense that just kind of is in there.
That is something that kind of happens with people who learn English as a second language. You can tell if they learned it from an American-centered course or a British English-centered course. Okay.
There's a student in one of my classes, and she is Japanese. And her English is, on the most part, very good. There is some slight, like, Asian accent.
Yeah.
But there's also Australian accent in there. And you can tell very specifically
that's
in very
fun.
distinctive words.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, it took me so long. I was like, hold on a minute. Like, did I just hear what I thought I heard? And the more you hear her speak, the more you're like, oh my gosh, she learned how to speak English from Australia. Or from an Australian person.
That would make sense.
In Australia. So it's not completely wild.
I have seen things like that.
That Arrow would
speak with a British accent.
speak with a British accent.
But people like, but other vampires don't have a British accent, which leads me to Carlisle. Carlisle is not a member of the Volturi.
He's
not a member of the ruling class.
He's not a member of the ruling class, but he did live with him for a very long time.
Okay. When was he born as a human?
In 1640 in London.
Oh, okay. Then he would definitely speak. But why then would he abandon his British accent for an American accent?
Well, he's been alive a very long time.
That's true. And he lives in America. I mean, obviously.
Yes, he lives in America.
He lives in America.
He's an American doctor.
But what would be his interest? Well, I guess he has to blend in.
Yeah.
I just thought of that all on my own. Are you
I'm
proud
so
of me?
proud of you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, that's like completely obvious.
He has to blend into human society.
Counterpoint.
Okay.
Counterpoint.
Okay.
Depending on when Carlisle moved to America, which I don't know if he was in the American Revolution or not, but I've read online that the British accent at the time of the American Revolution sounded like a Midwestern accent, and that the posh kind of what we think of as British only came into fashion afterwards because of some noble or queen or whatever who talked that way.
Okay.
And so it would make sense then for him, as somebody who came over before that kind of, I don't even know what to call it. What's a British accent? That kind of
that specific way to speak English.
Way of speaking that British people have now, he wouldn't have had it. So see, that makes sense, depending on when he came over, which I don't think is specified, at least from my personal knowledge.
I don't think that's perfectly accurate. I know that the way that English was spoken in Britain before the Industrial Revolution, basically, was different, and in some ways was comparable to a modern American accent. But it was not a one-to-one thing, and important, the American accent has changed and developed over time.
Yes.
So like interesting voice recordings I've heard from like the 1900s.
Oh yes.
With those people, they say things like "goyle" and instead of "girl," and they say "coil" instead of "curl." Depending on where you were from, specifically like New England is where that was for the most part, for my understanding and my little bit of research into it. So I don't think it's fair to say that Carlyle would have spoken with a Midwestern accent because he was born in 1640 in London. But you're right to say that he wouldn't speak with a modern British accent if he moved to America before, 1850.
So he was turned about 1660-ish, I guess.
Okay.
He's in his 20s. I'm not really sure exactly what age.
Turned as in turned into a vampire.
Oh my gosh, that's so obvious. We're talking
But I want to make
vampires.
sure that, but sometimes we get lost in the sauce, and someone listening might be like turned
into a vampire. The vampire Carlyle. Turned into a vampire. About 1660, and then it says that he lived with the Volturi for about 2 centuries before coming over to the New World.
Okay.
So that would be about 1800.
Were the Volturi always in Rome?
It's in Volterra.
It's its own city.
Yeah.
I thought it was Rome.
I think they were based there before, just because I know that Volterra has St. Marcus Day, which is like its 2000th year, whatever. I'm not sure exactly when they established their supreme reign. I think it was in the 5th century AD that they overthrew the Romanian covenant and became the head honchos.
Okay, so we've established vampires speak with modern accents and from even specific accents for ease of communication, for the ability to communicate with new vampires, and the ability to blend in with regular human society. Do you think it would have been interesting to have a vampire that spoke with an accent reflective of where they came from? Vampire in question, isn't there that one who was an American vampire who fought in the American Revolution and hates the British? Wouldn't it be interesting if he kept a colonial dialect? Wouldn't that be cool?
So what do you mean? Just you're looking for a vampire who speaks English with a thick accent?
With an accent specific to where they're from that reflects not only I'm not saying a Russian who talks like this, but I mean what I mean is someone who speaks as if they were born in 300 AD in Spain.
Why would they do that?
I don't know. I think that'd be cool.
To another person.
It'd be interesting if somebody looked at that language, analyzed what it sounded like, and took those sounds and mapped it onto modern English.
That's just somebody speaking with an accent.
Right, but constructing the English accent. Let's abandon this. Okay, final one that I have in my mind. There are some vampires that can read other people's thoughts, right? Do you think it matters if they read somebody's thoughts if they can't speak the same language that they do?
Yeah.
Is there examples of that I don't know about?
I haven't read Midnight Sun in its entirety. So far, Edward's only read the minds of teenage girls in Fort Washington. And boys. Let's not be weird about it. And other various adults around, I guess. But the point is, I think, is that, yes, he would have to be able to speak the language, because that's the language you think in, and he hears thoughts. There's some people who hear thoughts and stuff in other fandoms in weird pictures. So they just get the idea of what they're thinking about instead of words. But for Edward specifically, he hears their thoughts like they're talking out loud. And so if he doesn't understand what they're saying, then I think it would all be in Italian and he wouldn't be able to speak it. But it's not a
Okay.
problem for him because he knows so many languages.
Right. Okay. Could somebody purposefully confuse Edward by only thinking in, like, Chinese or whatever?
I'm sure he speaks Chinese.
Ah. So someone would have to know what language Edward speaks
Yeah.
to be able to see if they could
They would
trick
have
him.
to, first of all, know that he's reading their thoughts at all times.
Right.
Which is not something that's going to happen.
No.
The only human person that knew that was Bella, and he couldn't read her mind, so...
Right, that's true. I'm just saying that, like, J.R.R. Tolkien wouldn't let this happen.
He wouldn't, but Stephanie Meyer's no J.R.R. Tolkien.
Sad. So the moral of the story is that if Stephanie Meyers was J.R.R. Tolkien, we might not be having this discussion.
Yeah, no, I can guarantee you it wouldn't.
It would be a much different
the
discussion.
Twilight books wouldn't even be produced yet because she would still be working on the entire cosmological universe of why vampires came into existence. That's the truth.
That's the truth.
And she'd be more able to work
Right.
out how Bella got pregnant and how Jacob
Absurd.
imprinted on a freaking baby.
Disgusting.
It is. It's very much so. But, you know, that's Stephanie Meyer for you.
So that's been a linguistic dissection of Twilight,
Linguistic deep dive.
if you'll call it that. Go ahead and watch Twilight if you haven't before.
Don't watch Twilight.
Mom and Dad.
Watch, there's so many debates. I highly recommend Eclipse and Breaking Dawn.
I don't recommend any of them.
Oh, you do too. Pick your favorite. Tell the audience at home which your favorite of the 5 movies is.
I really like Breaking Dawn Part 1. Because
she's pregnant and she's dying?
Yeah, because it's so intense. And there's that dramatic, like, whole section where it's like the scary babies when Edward's looking at the computer and he just, like, Googled scary baby.
Oh, yeah,
you know
that's
what I mean?
a throwback
It's
to
so funny.
the first Twilight when she's Googling vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, like,
and his,
I don't know.
Nice turtleneck. I thought that was funny that he's in a turtleneck while he's Googling this.
I like to watch Twilight because I think certain sequences are funny, but I think it's really badass as Bella, like, gives birth to a baby and then, like, there's a vampire battle outside and she turns into a vampire at the last moment and, like, that's how the movie ends, is she's a vampire, like, boom. And that's really cool.
First she had no, that's not what happens.
That's not what happened.
No, she's on part 2 also.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Eclipse. No, everybody hates on Eclipse, and everybody thinks like either the original Twilight or New Moon's the best. But I personally like Eclipse.
Eclipse is the one where Edward runs away, right?
No, that's New Moon.
That's New Moon.
Yeah, Eclipse is the one
Where Victoria
is building the army
was building
of
the
newborn
army.
vampires,
And then
specifying
Jacob
vampires.
like forces Bella to kiss him or he'll kill him. Like, no, that's lame.
Yeah, that part's a little lame. But I don't know. I just like it. I think it's good
Yeah,
overall.
it's good. A tween. Favorite part, Breaking Down Part 1, when the guy is playing the saxophone in Rio. Best moment because they had this guy act. And like, blow your cheeks out, and he was probably like, "That is not how you play the saxophone." And they said, "I don't give a shit." All right.
We sat here and talked about Twilight for like an extra 10 minutes. That wasn't even about linguistics. So.
Yeah, it's a special Twilight episode. Every YouTube channel needs to have a special Twilight episode. Well, thanks again for listening to the Twilight episode of Ling King. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Watch some Twilight with your fam, and have a great day. Bye-bye.